Hey guys, welcome to Rihanna's Lens, where I interact with you about the components in the STEM field and introduce you to fascinating people who passionately inhabit the scientific and technical frontiers of our society. My name is Rihanna Malhotra, and I'm absolutely elated to share this podcast with all of you. On this episode, I'm joined by a guest who's a third-year PhD student at the University of Wisconsin. She's studying cell-signaling in the context of cancer. I'm so glad to welcome and introduce Chandler. Thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to begin our discussion.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me.
So I'm so excited to talk to you. Firstly, I want to know what exactly is it that motivated you to get into this field?
So it started in high school. So I was about 16 and I was invited to do a protein modeling project. I really only started learning what proteins were, but we got paired with a PhD student in Milwaukee to help us with our project. It was about a group of 5 or 6 of high school students, and I loved it. And that's pretty much what started. I was like, okay, I really like biology and chemistry. I knew that at the end of high school. And then when I was trying to pick a college major, I couldn't decide between biology and chemistry. And then I figured out that biochemistry was a thing and I didn't have to choose.
Like you always had an interest in bio and chem, as it seems, like from high school. So what made you get into cancer research specifically?
So actually about half of my immediate family members had a diagnosis of cancer while I was growing up. So I felt like it was something small that I could do, because I always felt so helpless about all of it, especially during my mom's cancer diagnosis. But then I realized that I could use science to fight back in my own way. And so I joined the lab that I'm in, because I really like the science and my past research experience blended well with it, but also because it's really common in the types of cancer that are really common in my family. So I feel like I'm making a small bit of difference anyway with my science knowledge.
Right. I think like the family influences really impact a person's career. So like you said, there are a lot of family members had been diagnosed with cancer growing up. So I think that, like you said, it made you feel helpless. So when you get into this field, it's all about, oh, what can I do better? And how can I help my family members? Because I'm sure there's a lot of pain and suffering that cancer patients go through. So I think that's a great cause that you're in this field for. And I wish you all the best for this.
Thanks.
So now as you're majoring under biochemistry, what are some of the coolest experiments that you've done in your lab?
So I've done a lot of different things. I do a lot of Western blots. If you follow me on Instagram, G protein coupled researcher, I do a lot of Western blots, which for those of you unfamiliar is running proteins on a gel. You separate them on a gel and then you transfer it over to a special piece of paper called nitrocellulose, and you put antibodies on it that bind to a specific protein that you're looking for so that you can see the levels of a certain protein in your sample. The process takes about 6 hours for the first day, and then you have to develop them the next day. So it's quite a time-involved process to do so many Westerns, and I do a lot of them. Like I do them almost every single day. So they're really useful, but I wouldn't say they're the coolest. Other people in our lab have done chemotaxis assays, which basically means that you're studying how cancer cells migrate. Like you literally put them underneath the microscope and you put a protein on one side of the chamber and you can physically watch the cancer cells migrate.
Wow, that sounds pretty awesome. So I'm sure you get to work with so many equipments in your lab. And as technology is advancing, I'm sure there must be a lot of more equipments coming in. So what are some of the most amazing equipments that you have used? Like, in high school, there are a lot of equipments that you use in your lab activities for the practicals. But was there anything different that really amazed you?
In high school, this was in 2014. So this was pretty new at the time. We got to use a 3D printer to print out a model of our protein. which was really cool. And I really liked that. And I got to get practice like using the computer to model the protein, and it was JMOL, I think, at the time. So that was pretty neat. I've also done what are some other cool things I've done? We've just recently got a really nice plate reader in our lab. So it's like worth about $200,000, I think. I got a grant for it, but we use a biophysical technique called BRET. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that, but it's a way to detect if two of your proteins that you're interested in are interacting in an actual cellular environment. So it's really easy to like purify, or relatively easy to purify two proteins and just like see if they interact in a test tube. But that doesn't really tell you about like if that's actually happening in a cell or what function it has. So we can add fluorescent proteins on the end of two different proteins that we're looking at. And then if they're close enough in proximity, the fluorophores actually excite each other, and we can measure that with a plate reader. So I've done that as well.
Yeah, all of these sound like such cool equipments. And isn't it crazy how much we've progressed from the past in terms of technology? Like, I'm sure in the olden days, all these things that we're building on now, all these experiments that we are working on, they had no equipments and they managed to find just the basics. And now we're just building upon it more and more with more technologies. And I'm sure as times go forward, there will be more technologies that we'll be able to find out something more in depth about ourselves and our body.
Yeah, absolutely. I always just think it's amazing how like such small molecules can cause such a big impact on human health.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. So even in labs now, I think automation and robots are just, as I said before, because the technology is advancing. So what do you think about automation taking over labs?
To some extent, it won't ever really take over because you still have to have people that design the experiments. A computer can't think critically about how to design the experiments, how to set it up, and all that. I think more training with robots and more training with like the technological part during graduate school, even undergrad, would be helpful. Having experience on those kinds of machines is definitely helpful. But it can be useful. I can see it, and I don't think it would ever really fully replace a scientist's job. I think it just redefines what a scientist's job would be.
Right, definitely. I think we will be using their aid. We will be having some help from them, but we'll always need programmers to be behind programming robots and developing software. So I don't think we leave anything to robots like anytime soon. So I think human involvement is really important. So I completely agree with you. Also, now going back to the cancer question, do you think we'll be able to cure cancer anytime soon?
Honestly, no, but that's only because it's so different in every person, right? So like I do some outreach with elementary school aged kids, and they ask me the same thing, like, oh, are you going to cure cancer? I'm like, well, no, but here's why. And like my research is still important and it's still worthwhile to do. But when every single cancer cell has different sets of mutations and different sets of proteins overexpressed, you pretty much just have to treat each individualized person based on the mutations that they have. And those can be genetic or sometimes they're completely random. And so being able to understand what happens when each one of those proteins goes awry, like our lab studies a G protein coupled receptor that when it's overexpressed causes cells to grow out of control and migrate out of control. Both are bad. But not every type of cancer has an excess amount of that receptor. But if there are enough, labs all over the world focusing on a different protein, then we can better understand the process as a whole.
Right. So, I'm sure, but also, since I'm in high school, I'm learning about the DNA structure, and what I know that there are telomeres at the end of the DNA. So, why can't we make some? I know it's a really hard process, but can we make any chemical that stops the replication of the DNA or stops the telomeres from just replicating?
Yeah. So That's a good question. And actually, so that's the basis, not telomeres exactly, but like that is the basis behind chemotherapy. So a lot of common chemotherapies will interrupt DNA synthesis, because if you can't replicate your DNA properly, then you're not going to go through mitosis because you don't have two good copies of the DNA and the cell dies. So this is the idea behind, any fast growing cell population will die with this essentially poison. And that's why you lose your hair when you go through chemo, because your hair is really fast dividing. It grows really quickly. And when your hair cells can't divide, then you lose them. So those are the basis. The issue though is that, okay, how do we have some sort of targeted therapy that makes it so that only the tumor cells are the ones that are dying and not all the lining of your intestines and not your hair and all of those things, because those are the things that make cancer treatment very difficult.
Yeah, I'm sure these are huge challenges, and I'm sure I just hope we can find a way to prevent all these things, or just find a way to slow down the process in a way.
Yeah.
So I think that would be really helpful to the patients. So I don't know, maybe like gradually we'll be able to progress with the help of technology, or just amazing people that come into the field like you. So just hopefully we can inspire more people to join this field and help the cancer patients. So now moving forward, what is the most rewarding aspect about your field?
Oh, that's a good question. I really like being able to pass on my science knowledge to other people, with all different backgrounds. I think it's really important to make science more accessible to the general population and communicating my science. Like, I really love being able to use my creativity to make like graphics, to put in science presentations that I'm giving to explain my research. Because ultimately, the more people that really understand what we're doing, then the more people can get behind us in the fight against cancer and, generally support health, biomedical research in general. So.
Right, definitely. And also, as you said, that to impart the information about science to other people, it's so important. And also, especially now that social media is booming, there are a lot of people, like from before, I've just noticed that a lot of people want to get into being an influencer or just getting into YouTube or TikTok. And they're drifting apart from the actual fields that I'm not saying that these are not like really fields, but they're drifting apart from the STEM field. So that's why it's so important to raise awareness about how important these things can also be. And there are fewer and fewer people that are like joining. That's what I have noticed. I don't know about you. Like, what are your opinions about this?
I'd say that those two things aren't mutually exclusive. I started a science Instagram account just because I really want to be a lecturer. I want to be a college professor. That's why I'm in graduate school. But I wasn't really getting a lot of teaching experience because I was early on in my PhD, but I really wanted to do it. And so I decided, I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll just communicate my science on the internet. And then all of a sudden, now there's like somehow thousands of people that want to follow me. Follow my science. And so that was never my intention, was to be like an influencer, but I really like being able to show what my experiments look like on a day-to-day basis. And like, this is what it's like to be a scientist. And I also want to be like, I don't want to discourage anyone from going into science, but like, I also want to be transparent about how hard it is. Like, a lot of your experiments don't work, and it can be really hard to separate your failure from an experiment failing. Those kinds of things. Like, there are a lot of struggles about being in academia, and I want to be honest about those too. I mean, I'm still here. It hasn't driven me out, but like, I want to be honest and transparent about what that kind of experience is like as a woman in science.
Right. I think social media for that reason is definitely a boon. And I think it's great that you're able to impart more information about science and be so transparent about it, because I'm sure we don't always look through rose-tinted glasses when we are working in a lab or just any field. So it's great that you're also sharing the challenges that you face along with the benefits. So like moving forward, I'm sure you did an undergrad program also before doing PhD. So what did you take in your undergrad?
Yeah, so I attended Carroll University in Waukesha, Wisconsin for my undergrad. I graduated in 2019. Was there for 4 years. I took a genetics class that I really enjoyed as a sophomore. I took an advanced cell biology class, obviously really good biochemistry classes, advanced analytical, where I got to use all sorts of instruments, and I really got hands-on practice with like running my samples and the internal workings, a little bit of like how they worked, not too complicated as an undergrad, but just like generally what my samples were doing while they were in there. So yeah, I really enjoyed my time in undergrad. I miss it a lot, actually. I really enjoyed the class structure and all my instructors and everything, because I mean, that's ultimately the kind of environment that I want to be a professor in. So
Yeah, and did your undergrad program also offer a co-op or an internship?
Yeah, so I did 2 summers of undergraduate research, but it wasn't actually through my university. I actually did it where I'm at grad school now. um, so it's not too far. It's like a 20-minute drive or so away. And so I spent 2 summers doing full-time research, both between my sophomore and junior, and then my junior and senior year. So it was 2 different labs, 2 different research projects, but at the same school.
So did these research like projects in your grad school motivate you to join the grad school that you're in currently?
Yeah, because like I knew some of the professors from my summer experiences when I applied, so then I wasn't going in completely blind. It also happened to be that the lab that I joined, the 2 background experiences that I'd had, so the 2 summers, they kind of blended perfectly into what became my dissertation work. So I got to be able to combine the 2. So during my first summer, I did ubiquitin proteasome system stuff, so like protein degradation, and how it applies to neurodegenerative disease like Alzheimer's and ALS and Huntington's. And then for my second summer, I learned about G protein coupled receptors, and I studied it in terms of blood pressure regulation. And now I combined ubiquitin and GPCRs for my dissertation work. So I took a little bit from both and smushed them together and made a project for myself, kind of.
Yeah, I think it's all interconnected. Like even our bodies, everything is related. And as you mentioned before, that even the smallest cell contains so many different structures within, and even those have structures within. So our body is so vast, and that too, it's one cell that we are seeing. There are so many cells in our body, so that's just insane to me.
I know. It's amazing that we all ever work right. If I think about it too much, it hurts.
Right, absolutely. There's so much to go into, and so many different fields that are exploring everything about our body. Like you're specializing under one type of cell, but there are so many different fields that are focusing on so many other things in our body. So it's just crazy.
I know. I agree. I think it's really cool.
So, what are your plans after completing your PhD?
So I want to be a lecturer. So I have learned that like I like research for what it is, but I just don't think it's sustainable for me for a long-term career. And what I mean by that is just I don't want to have to write grants all the time. I went through the process of writing a grant for the National Institute of Health last year, and it was very stressful. It turned out well for me, but it's just not something that I would want to have to do for the rest of my life. I mean, and that's a good thing to learn, but that's what comes with being a research professional for the most part. And so I would rather be in an environment where I can have teaching and curriculum development as my primary job.
Right. So, do you want to get into some field that also has communication involved in it? Because I'm sure research is more based around a lab. So are you looking forward to something with communication along with your research?
Yeah, so I that's the problem is like I mean I might continue research afterwards, but I might not, and that's okay. It's a love of science either way. And I think training the next generation of budding scientists is I argue is equally important. So that's really where my passion is. I really like being able to explain science to other people because it always just seems so intimidating and I just want to make it more accessible.
Right, right. But I mean, STEM is such an interdisciplinary field, so there's so much to get into. So I'm sure that
Yeah.
you'll find something that's interrelated that fits as per your
Yeah.
experiences and what you want to really get into.
Yep. Yeah, I'm open. Sometimes I just kind of browse around Google and see what kinds of science communication jobs can I get. Just because I'm curious. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we just depend on Google because it has all the answers. And
Yeah, I don't know. And I mean, all everyone on my committee and stuff, I mean, they're all in academia. That's the path that they chose, and that's great. But like, not a lot of people know about all the other choices that you have. So
yeah, and the great thing about Google is that if you search something, you can either come out of it stressed or you'll be happy with your results. So it's really
yep,
unpredictable, but that's the great thing about Google. It gives you
yep.
all the information just completely unfiltered.
It also is helpful too that I'm in this awesome science communication community on Instagram, and I have friends in all sorts of areas. I have friends in artificial intelligence now. I have friends in pathology labs. I have friends in microbiology labs, and like they're all going different directions with their PhDs, and so I can ask them, which is helpful.
Right, yeah. So, like as you said, it's so important to surround yourself with people that are in the same field as yours, or if not the same, just some field that they have stemmed from after biochemistry, because you learn from their experiences, and so maybe that can help you choose which path you want to go after your PhD.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Lastly, I want to ask you, why do you think more people should join the STEM fields?
Well, there's a lot there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of things going on. I mean, if you want to go the more engineering route, I mean, I know nothing about physics, and hats off to people who love physics and are passionate about it, because I just really don't conceptually understand it. Like here, admitting my my downfalls, right? Like I love biochem, but like there are just some things that I don't understand. So other people should go and do that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think people get intimidated by like, oh, I'm not good at math, or oh, I don't have perfect grades. Like you don't need perfect grades. You need passion. If you really like it, like you'll get there. And I think people are more patient in the training part than what you think they might be. People are willing to train you and get you ready for the job that you really want. I know a lot of people who like really didn't have perfect GPAs, got into great PhD programs, or decided halfway through college that they wanted to do something else, and like that's okay too. So, um, yeah, that's that's how I feel about that, I guess.
Right, and as you said, everyone has a different skill set. Like someone in the maths or physics field must be so intimidated by biochem. So everyone has something different to offer to the table. So being authentic is the best thing that anyone can ever bring. And that's why I think STEM is such an important field that people should get into, because we all have different skill sets, and STEM is all about logical thinking, and it really widens your horizon. So STEM is
Yeah.
an extremely important field according to me.
Well, and I would say too, like, especially with the logical thinking, there's certainly a lot of that. And I've been always surprised at how much creative thinking is necessary. Like when I'm troubleshooting an experiment, it's like, okay, how much should I change the concentration? Based on what this looked like, how much should I do? Or, how can I slightly change how I'm making this figure? Like, how can I make this Could I use color to make it more clear? If I made different color differences, is it going to be too busy? Those kinds of things, like composition of figures and stuff like that. There's a lot more subjectivity to it than you think. And so creative-minded people are very welcome in STEM, and there will be a spot for you.
Yeah, well, I think we are all problem solvers, everyone in the STEM field. So if any challenge is thrown at you, you'll use all your problem solving things that are skills that you get through your STEM experience, and you just put it at anything you get. So that's why I think STEM is so amazing, because you use your mind throughout, like every step of the way. So even throughout your daily activities, sometimes you must be catching yourself thinking, oh, that's something I've seen in the lab, so probably I can use this here as well.
Yeah.
I also want to ask you, what advice would you like to give to anyone that wants to join this same field as yours?
Like biochemistry research
Yeah.
in general. If you are a high school student or an undergrad, there are so many opportunities for you. And a lot of times you just have to ask. And I know it seems big and scary, but like mentors want to mentor you. They want to train people just like you and get them excited about science. All you have to do is ask. And having that kind of research experience can really propel you forward. And making those professional connections early on is really important. I would say too that academia does have a way of taking over your life if you let it. You can't let it. Embrace who you are. Stay with your hobbies, maintain them outside of lab. You are a scientist, but you can also be, a wonderful friend and an artist and all the other things you want to be. I really don't want people to feel like if you don't dedicate every single aspect of your life to being a scientist, then you're not a good scientist. It's not true. Like, you can be a good scientist and be good at so many other things that make you who you are.
Yeah, that's some really great and heartfelt advice. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much, Chandler, for coming on my podcast. I had a great time talking to you, and I definitely got to know so much about your experiences and your insights. So it was just amazing. Thank you so much.
Good, I'm glad. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and to let all of you know, this podcast is now available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all your listening platforms. Make sure you subscribe to all of them and stay tuned for more. Chandler, is there anything you'd like to shout out or say anything before you log off?
Nope, thanks for listening. Thanks for having me. Yeah.